Hello and welcome back to the RPA Developer Training. This is the Excel and Data Tables lesson in the Production Ready Essentials curriculum. In this video, we'll cover some of the key aspects of working with data table variables. We'll create two data table variables and merge their values together, and then we'll filter the unwanted columns out. In the end, we'll sort the rows of the resulting data table in ascending order. But first, let's go through the basics. Data table variables store data structured in a tabular form, and that means any information organized in rows and columns. This variable type is the equivalent of a spreadsheet containing cells which are individually identified through the column letter and the row number. UiPath Studio includes many activities that output data table variables. In this demo, we'll focus on the Build Data Table activity, which is largely used to define the structure of a data table. Let's examine the first example to see all the configuration options. The Build Data Table window enables us to set the number of columns in our table and the type of data that they contain. Let's click the Edit button to see more options. The columns can comprise any type of data, as we can browse for types and make the selection that suits our automation scenario. Now, there are some additional column customization options, and we'll take a quick look at them before moving on. The Allow Null checkbox allows for specifying if the column can contain blank cells. Next, the Auto Increment feature only applies to integers, so it's not available for us here. Any default cell value can be added in this field. If we select the Unique checkbox, we can make sure that all the values are different from one another. That can be of great help when dealing with types of data such as user IDs in order to ensure a high-quality output. We can also adjust the maximum length of the value in a cell. Let's click OK to return to the Build Data Table window. We can easily rearrange the columns by dragging and dropping them to the intended position. For demonstration purposes, we used the Build Data Table activity to add values to our data table variables. In business scenarios, however, there are more efficient ways to achieve that. For example, the Read Range activity captures the data in a spreadsheet and stores it in a data table variable. In this demo, we'll work with two predefined data table variables. The first one contains information about the members of a library, their name, unique ID, department, and phone number. The second variable, which is called Overdue Books, contains data related to all the currently borrowed books. The author name, the title, the unique book ID, as well as the ID of the borrower. Next, we want to collect the names and phone numbers of the library members with overdue books and store them in a single variable. To do that, let's add a Join Data Table activity and open the Join wizard. Now, the join type is inner, because our resulting data table must include rows extracted from both our tables, according to the join rule that we will configure. The first input data table we'll provide is overdue books, as there might be members who borrowed multiple books. The users variable goes in the field below. Let's create a new variable for the output. We'll call it borrowed books. And now it's time to determine the join criterion. We'll select the equal operation and write the names of the two ID columns. And we've just finished configuring the Join Data Table activity, so we can click OK. Let's proceed to the next activity in the workflow. To be able to print our result to the output panel, we'll use the Output Data Table activity, which converts an input data table to a string variable. The input is borrowed books, and the output needs to be stored in a new variable. So let's hit Ctrl+K and name this one Borrowed Books String. We'll also change the name of the activity to Output Borrowed Books to Text for increased workflow readability. And we'll display the content of the variable that we've just created using a write-line activity. And let's run the workflow. The output panel displays the correct results, so our project works as expected. However, there are some unneeded details that we can filter out to prevent clutter. Specifically, the ID column is included twice, and the department one is not relevant. As a result, we'll use two Remove Data column activities. Let's place them above the Output Data Table activity. The first one will remove the duplicate column from the Borrowed Books data table, and let's use the index of the column, which is 6. We'll also rename this activity. And now we can move on to the next one. Once again, the data table is Borrowed Books. And now we can use either the index or the name to identify the column to be removed. So we can type department between quotation marks. And let's run the workflow again. Great, the unwanted columns have disappeared. Now, for the last touch, let's sort the data according to the user ID to make sure that users are contacted to return all the books that they have borrowed. Let's add a Sort Data Table activity right before the Output Data Table one. We need to add the Borrowed Books variable both as input and as output, and the ID column in the Name Input field under Sorting column. All right, let's run this one more time. And it works. This concludes our video on working with data tables. We'll see you soon, and until then, happy automation!